Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something real. Have you ever looked back at a relationship and thought, where did my power go? You started off confident, glowing, magnetic, but somewhere along the way you began shrinking, questioning your worth, begging for breadcrumbs, and calling it connection. When you meet someone new and feel a spark, it's tempting to go all in. You text first, make time for their schedule, cancel your own plans, and give more of yourself than what's been asked for or earned. This is what overinvesting too early looks like. Giving in hopes of being chosen. It's an emotional gambling. The more you invest, the more you feel entitled to an outcome. But in doing so, you quietly put the other person in a position of power and place yourself in a role of pursuit. Relationships should be mutual, not a performance to prove your worth. When you choose yourself, you flip that script. Instead of rushing to pour into someone else, you pause and observe how they show up for you. You don't rearrange your life around a stranger. You take your time. You give proportionally to what you receive. This doesn't mean you become cold or guarded. It means you're intentional. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it's self-respecting. It means holding your own pace, keeping your commitments, staying rooted in your identity. You don't abandon your life to accommodate theirs. You integrate them into your world slowly, after they've earned trust. Overinvesting soon often stems from a fear of loss. You're afraid that if you don't show how available, kind, or devoted you are, they'll leave. But a connection that's only sustained by overgiving isn't real. It's dependent. When you choose yourself, you realize that the right person won't need convincing. They'll see your value in your presence, not in your effort to win them. You no longer chase chemistry at the cost of clarity. You ask yourself, is this person showing me in the same way I'm showing up for them? If the answer is no, you adjust your investment accordingly. Choosing yourself creates space for someone else to meet you halfway. It sets the tone. It allows the dynamic to unfold naturally, without you carrying the emotional labor alone. You don't fill silence with energy, you let the other person reach out. You stop sending texts that go unanswered. You pay attention to their actions, not their potential. And most importantly, you resist the urge to prove yourself through overgiving. When you choose yourself, you begin to enjoy dating as an extension of your full life, not a replacement for it. You stay grounded in your routines and your friendships. You remain your own source of joy and stability. That energy is attractive. It sends a message that you're open, but not empty, perfect, that you're available, but not desperate. And from that place, you don't fear walking away when someone's effort doesn't match yours. Because you already know your worth doesn't decrease just because someone else fails to recognize it. Breadcrumbs are the small, inconsistent efforts someone gives you to keep you around without offering real commitment. It's the late-night texts, the vague promises of sometime soon, the compliments with no follow-through, the temporary attention when they sense you pulling away. When you tolerate breadcrumbs, you're teaching someone that they don't have to very hard to keep access to you. It becomes a cycle where you're emotionally starved but stay hopeful that those crumbs will eventually lead to something more. The truth is, if someone wanted to show up fully, they would. The inconsistency isn't confusion, it's clarity. Choosing yourself means you stop making excuses for someone else's half-hearted effort. You stop romanticizing potential and start observing patterns. When someone gives you the bare minimum, and you continue to accept it, you're reinforcing the message that they don't to offer more. You find yourself adjusting your standards downward, tolerating delayed replies, cancelled plans, emotional unavailability, and telling yourself, at least they reached out. But love shouldn't feel like a guessing game. It should feel like safety, clarity, and mutual investment. Choosing yourself is reclaiming your right to expect that. When you stop tolerating breadcrumbs, you begin measuring connection not by how someone makes you feel in their best moments, but by how consistently they show up. A sweet message after days of silence doesn't mean they care. It means they're checking that you're still available. You learn to recognize that emotional how you feel when they throw you a crumb isn't love, it's relief from your own anxiety. That kind of dynamic slowly drains your self-esteem and makes you second-guess your standards. Choosing yourself is realizing you don't need to settle for moments when what you want is consistency. It's easy to get caught in the hope that if you just hang on a little longer, prove you're loyal, or wait patiently, they'll change. But waiting for someone to change while ignoring how they're showing up now is a form of self-abandonment. Choosing yourself means honoring what you need, even if it means letting go of someone you wanted. It's having the courage to walk away from ambiguity. It's saying, if you can't meet me where I am, I'm not going to lower myself to meet you halfway. When you stop tolerating breadcrumbs, you create room for real connection to enter. You're no longer stuck managing disappointment or overanalyzing every interaction. You have clarity because you've drawn a line in the sand. You're no longer emotionally investing in someone whose actions leave you uncertain. Choosing yourself in this way is an act of emotional self-respect. It shifts the focus from what someone else is doing to what you're choosing to accept. You begin responding to reality instead of potential. And in doing so, you make it clear that your time, your energy, and your heart are not available for anything less than intentional effort. Losing yourself in a relationship often starts quietly. You don't even notice it at first. You stop going to your weekly yoga class because they want to hang out. You say yes to things you used to say no to. You stop wearing what you like, stop spending time with your friends, and slowly shift your identity to fit into theirs. You become so focused on being chosen and kept that you forget you were whole before they came along. In trying to merge, you dissolve. This doesn't happen all at once. It happens through small, daily compromises that pull you further from who you are. Choosing yourself means preserving the parts of your life that existed before the relationship and refusing to let them fade just to keep someone else comfortable. It's knowing that a relationship should add to your life, not replace it. When you choose yourself, you stay grounded in the things that make you you, your routines, your ambitions, your joy. You keep your friendships close, you continue to invest in your growth, and you don't let your world shrink to revolve around one person. You maintain your individuality, because that's what makes you attractive and powerful in the first place. When you lose yourself in a relationship, your boundaries start to blur. You say yes when you mean no. You silence your needs to avoid conflict. You abandon your instincts and values just to maintain peace. Over time, this leads to resentment, anxiety, and emotional depletion. Choosing yourself is recognizing that compromising who you are is not the price of love. The right relationship won't ask you to dim your light. It will protect it. You don't become smaller to fit into someone else's life. You stay expansive, and the relationship grows around that, not the other way around. The fear of being alone can make you cling tighter when things start to shift. But choosing yourself teaches you that your identity is not defined by your relationship status. Perfect. You can be deeply connected to someone without being dependent on them for your sense of self. You learn to check in with your own voice regularly and ask, is this still me? And if the answer is no, have the courage to recalibrate. You don't wait for someone else to validate your worth. You validate it with the way you live, what you prioritize, and how you show up for yourself. When you maintain a strong sense of self, you show up to love with clarity and confidence. You don't need to chase or prove. You're not threatened by space or silence, because your sense of identity is rooted. Choosing yourself means you stay connected to your truth regardless of how much you love someone. You love fully, but not at the cost of your essence. You share your life, but you don't give it away. You remain your own home, even while building one with someone else. Seeking constant validation in a relationship often comes from a place of insecurity or fear of not being enough. It shows up in repeated questions like, do you still like me? Or was that okay? Or in the need for reassurance every time something feels uncertain. This creates a dynamic where your sense of self-worth becomes tied to someone else's approval. You begin looking to them to regulate your emotions, soothing your doubts, and give you permission to feel secure. But no matter how many compliments or confirmations you receive, it never feels like enough, because the core issue isn't their silence. It's your disconnection from your own voice. Choosing yourself means learning how to validate yourself from within. It means understanding that your worth doesn't rise or fall based on someone's mood, reply time, or emotional availability. Instead of constantly asking for reassurance, you begin to anchor into your own truth. You ask, do I feel good about how I'm showing up? Rather than, do they like how I'm showing up? You build a foundation where your value isn't measured by their attention, but by your alignment with who you are and what you stand for. When you rely on external validation, you unintentionally hand over your power. You become hyper-aware of their reactions, overanalyze their words, and start adjusting your behavior to avoid disapproval. This makes the relationship feel more like walking on eggshells than growing in connection. Choosing yourself shifts this pattern. You become less reactive to someone else's silence or distance, because you're not depending on their feedback to feel okay. You can hold your center even when things feel uncertain, because you know how to affirm your own value without needing to someone to affirm it constantly. Choosing yourself also means recognizing the difference between healthy emotional support and emotional dependence. Wanting connection is natural. Wanting appreciation and love is human. But when every emotional dip or doubt needs to be soothed by the other person, it places pressure on the relationship to meet needs that only self-awareness and self-worth can fulfill. You begin to create emotional safety within yourself, so you're not constantly searching for it outside. You develop the inner voice that says, I am enough, even if they're quiet today, or I can sit with this discomfort without needing instant relief. When you stop seeking constant validation, your energy shifts. You become more grounded, more centered, more magnetic. You ask fewer anxious questions and start making more empowered choices. You speak from clarity rather than insecurity. You attract better communication because you're not demanding it. You're embodying it. Choosing yourself teaches you that true security comes from knowing who you are, not from how often someone tells you what you want to hear. You show up fully, not because you're trying to win someone over, but because you're already standing in your own worth, with or without their confirmation. Knowing that you are the prize means fully embodying your value before anyone else validates it. It's a mindset where you stop chasing and start attracting, where your energy shifts from, "I hope pick me too. I'll see if they're aligned with what I want." When you forget you are the prize, you begin to settle. You start tolerating bad behavior, lowering your standards, and trying to prove your worth to someone who hasn't earned access to you. You confuse effort with entitlement, thinking that if you just love harder, give more, or become easier to please, you'll finally be enough. But proving your value is not the same as living in it. Choosing yourself means you no longer place your worth in someone else's hands. You stop seeing love as something to be earned and start viewing it as something to be mutually exchanged. You don't beg for attention or fear rejection, because your sense of identity is not built on external approval. You already know who you are and what you bring to the table. You understand that your time, energy, softness, loyalty, and presence are not things to be handed out freely. They are to be received by someone who recognizes and reciprocates them. When you know you are the prize, you don't panic when someone pulls away. You don't chase someone who's unsure. You observe. You watch how they show up, how they handle communication, how they make space for you. And if they don't meet the level of effort and emotional availability you bring, you move on without bitterness. Not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more. You choose to be in spaces where your energy is matched, not drained. Where your love is received, not exploited. Choosing yourself in this way also means you stop shrinking to be more digestible. You don't water yourself down, soften your truth, or become more agreeable just to be liked. You allow your full self to be seen, your boundaries, your depth, your expectations, and you let that filter out the wrong people. You realize that not being for everyone is a strength, not a flaw. The right person won't be intimidated by your standards. They'll be inspired by them. Knowing you are the prize also changes how you communicate. You're not afraid to walk away from inconsistent effort or unclear intentions. You don't chase closure or over-explain your boundaries. You let your self-respect speak for you. And that quiet confidence is more powerful than any performance could ever be. You're no longer asking, "What do I need to do to keep them interested?" But instead, "Do they even qualify to experience all that I bring?" When you live from that space, you stop clinging to what's not right for you. You stop over-functioning in dynamics that leave you unfulfilled. You don't just wait to be chosen. You choose. And in doing so, you honor the truth that you were never meant to beg for what should be willingly given. Choosing connection over performance means letting go of the pressure to constantly impress, please, or present a perfect version of yourself in relationships. It's the difference between being real and being rehearsed. When you operate from a performance mindset, you're always calculating how you sound, how you look, whether they'll like what you said, whether you're too much or not enough. You become hyper-aware of how you're being perceived, and you start to shape your personality to fit what you think the other person wants. That's not connection, it's survival. It's trying to earn love by becoming who someone else prefers, rather than being who you truly are. Choosing yourself means valuing authenticity over approval. You stop trying to be liked and start focusing on being understood. You prioritize emotional honesty over perfection. You're willing to show the parts of yourself that are still healing, still growing, still figuring it out. You don't mask your vulnerability to maintain an image of strength. You realize that true connection happens when someone sees the real you, not just the curated version you present when you're afraid of being rejected. You stop performing and start being, trusting that the right person will appreciate your truth more than your polish. When you're stuck in performance mode, every interaction feels like a test. You replay conversations in your head, stress over responses, and second-guess your instincts. You edit your words to avoid judgment, and your presence becomes driven by anxiety instead of presence. Choosing yourself liberates you from that constant internal tension. It allows you to show up as you are, imperfect, honest, and open. You no longer feel the need to overcompensate. You don't try to be charming all the time or agreeable just to keep the peace. You let your emotions be seen without shame. And in doing so, you invite others to do the same. Choosing connection also means creating space for mutual discovery. You're not trying to prove you're the one. From the beginning, you're observing, exploring, and asking deeper questions. Can I be myself around this person? Do they make me feel safe, heard, and seen? Does this feel mutual, or am I carrying the emotional weight alone? You resist the urge to win someone over, and instead focus on building something real with someone who's showing up in return. Performance chases validation, but connection builds intimacy. When you choose yourself, you trust that your worth doesn't depend on being impressive. It depends on being present. You're no longer interested in performing a version of yourself to keep someone's attention. You'd rather be fully you and risk being misunderstood than be half of yourself just to be accepted. That level of self-respect changes how you experience love. It brings peace instead of pressure, depth instead of decoration, and authenticity instead of exhaustion. You realize that connection doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, and choosing yourself is what creates the space for that kind of presence to exist.